Hello, mighty companions. This is Earl Purdy, and I'm here to do A Course in Miracles, and I'm going to do lesson 299, which is Eternal Holiness. Eternal holiness abides in me. Eternal holiness abides in you. Eternal holiness. Look me right in the eye. Look me right in the eyes. Eternal holiness lives in you. The Course defines holiness as innocent and eternal as constant and permanent. So we could say permanent innocence abides means lives. Permanent innocence lives in me. Permanent innocence lives in you. That means eternal holiness abides in you. Your innocence, which is your holiness and power, is far beyond your own ability to understand or know. Your innocence and your power is far beyond your ability to understand and know at this level. Do you know that your innocence and your power is far beyond your ability to understand or know? Yet God, who is your Father, your Creator, who created your holiness, who created your innocence, who created your power, acknowledges your power as God's power. Your love is God's love. Your innocence as God's innocence. Our will together understands your eternal holiness and innocence. Do you know that our will, our thought, our minds together we can understand each other's innocence and each other's holiness. And our will together knows that our holiness and our innocence is so. Our will together, our minds together know this is true. Father, your innocence is not, Father, I know that. Do you know that your innocence is not of you? Your innocence is not of you. It has nothing to do with what you can do to make yourself innocent. It's not what you can do to make yourself innocent. It is not yours to be destroyed by sin. The idea of sin can never destroy your innocence. The idea of guilt can never destroy your innocence. It is not yours to suffer from attack. Illusions, false ideas can hide your innocence. Do you know that false ideas about yourself can hide your innocence, but cannot put out its radiance, nor dim its light? Your innocence, your power, your beauty stands forever perfect and untouched. Do you recognize that your innocence and your beauty stands forever perfect and forever untouched? In your innocence are all things healed. In your innocence, all things are healed. That's a lot. Do you know in your innocence, all things are healed, for all things remain as God created them. Everything is still the way that God created it. We haven't changed anything from the way that love and truth created it. And so you can know your holiness. You can know your power. Do you know that you can know your power? Do you know that you can know your holiness today? You can know your innocence today. You can know your power in this situation today. You can know your power in this circumstance today. For holiness itself created me. Innocence itself created you. Innocence itself created you. And you can know your source because it is God's will that God be known. You can know your source because it's the will of God that you know God. It is the will of God that you know God. It's the will of love that you know love. It is the will of love that you know love. Eternal holiness abides in me. Eternal innocence abides in you. Eternal innocence abides in you. Constant innocence, constant innocence, constant innocence lives in you. Do you know that constant innocence lives in you? Constant innocence lives in you. Eternal holiness abides in you. Eternal holiness abides in you. Eternal holiness. Eternal holiness. Eternal holiness abides in me. Eternal holiness abides in you. Eternal holiness abides in me. Eternal holiness abides in you. That's constant innocence lives in you. Constant innocence lives in me. Constant innocence lives in you and me. Permanent innocence. Permanent innocence lives in you. Permanent innocence lives in you. Permanent innocence. Permanent innocence. Constant innocence. Constant power lives in you. Constant, constant, constant love lives in you. Eternal holiness abides in me. This is Earl Purdy. Check me out at earlpurdy.com, earlpurdy.com. And remember, constant innocence, eternal innocence abides in you. Hello, this is Earl Raj Purdy. This is Earl Raj Purdy again, and I'm doing What is the World? What is the real 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 world? Do you know that the real world is a symbol like the rest of what perception offers, because everything perception offers is a symbol? Yet the real world stands for the opposite of the world you made. The real world stands for the opposite of the world you made. The real world stands for the opposite of the world you made. What that means is that usually the world is seen through eyes of fear. And so the world brings witnesses of terror to a person's mind. The real world cannot be perceived. You cannot see the real world. You cannot see the world of love. You cannot see the real world except through eyes forgiveness blesses. And we've already learned that forgiveness is correct perception. So you can't see a real world of love unless you're looking through eyes that have been blessed by correct perception. So a world that is seen through eyes that are seeing correctly see a world where terror is impossible and witnesses to fear cannot be found. So when you actually seeing correctly, when you actually seeing through your real mind, your loving mind, you will be able to tell, because you will be in a world that is impossible to be terrified. It will be a world it's impossible to be terrified. Check this out, mighty companion. And witnesses to fear cannot be found. So when you're in the real world, you don't see any witnesses to fear. Do you know that the real world holds a counterpart for each unhappy thought reflected in your world? Which means the real world holds a sure correction for the sights of fear and sounds of battle which your world contains. The real world gives a sure correction for the sights of fear and the sounds of battle which your world contains. Do you know that the real world shows a world seen through quiet eyes, and quiet eyes come from a mind at peace? So when you're using and seeing the real, when you're seeing the real world, you're seeing a different world. You're seeing a world through quiet eyes. You're seeing a world through a mind at peace. In other words, there's nothing but rest when you're seeing through the real world. You just feel peace. When you're seeing through your real eyes, when you're seeing correctly, you don't see anything but peace. There's nothing but rest there. That means when you're seeing correctly, when you finally achieve the state of mind that the Course in Miracles is teaching, there are no cries of pain. You don't hear about pain. There are no sorrows. For nothing in the real world remains outside forgiveness. So nothing in the real world remains outside of correct perception. And the Course in Miracles defines correct perception and forgiveness is the same thing. And when you're in the real world, the sights are gentle. So you're seeing gentle sights when you're seeing the real world. In other words, do you know that only happy sights and sounds can reach the mind that has forgiven itself, the mind that is seeing itself correctly? When your mind is seeing itself correctly, the only thing that can reach you is happy sights and happy sounds. So that's how you can tell when you're actually seeing correctly. When you're actually seeing correctly, the only thing that can reach your perception is happy sights and sounds. So what need has such a mind that is seeing with love? What need has such a mind for thoughts of death, thoughts of attack, thoughts of murder? What can a loving mind perceive surrounding it but safety, love, and joy? What can a mind that is perceiving correctly perceive that it would choose to be condemned? And what is there that it would judge against? The world that a forgiving mind sees, the world that a correctly perceiving mind sees, the world that a healed mind sees, arises from a mind at peace within itself. So the loving, peaceful world that we keep hearing about, that world that's full of love and safety and joy, and we're not dealing with all the stuff that we're dealing with here sometimes that seems to cause us fear. We're not going to see that self until we're perceiving correctly. So when you're perceiving correctly, you have a mind at peace within itself, and then that mind that's at peace within itself then sees this loving world, this peaceful world, this abundant world. So no danger lurks in anything that a correctly perceiving mind sees. For the real world is kind, and only kindness does it look upon. No danger lurks in anything it sees, for it is kind, and only kindness does the mind that has forgiven itself look upon. Are you aware? Are you aware that the real world is a symbol? That the real world is the symbol that the dream of being sinful and the dream of being guilty is over. In other words, you are the child of God and you are no longer asleep. You can tell when you're no longer asleep because you will be in that totally safe world. And your eyes will be open. And do you know that your waking eyes will perceive the sure reflection of God's love? When you're seeing correctly, all you see is a reflection of the love of the universe. The certain promise that you are redeemed. You just see the certain promise that you are healed, that you are whole, that you are innocent. When you see the real world that there's only total love and safety in, it signifies the end of time, because its perception, the perception of a really, truly safe, loving world, makes time purposeless, because the purpose of time is to learn how to see correctly. So when you're finally doing it, time has no more purpose. Are you aware that the Holy Spirit, your loving right mind, that voice for God in you, has no need of time? When time has served God's purpose, there is no need for time after time has served the Holy Spirit's purpose. Now the Holy Spirit, your loving right mind, your true self, your voice for God waits but that one instant more. You're waiting just that one instant more for God to take God's final step, and time has disappeared, taking perception with it as it goes, and leaving but the truth to be itself. It's time for the truth to be itself. It's time for that good stuff we've been reading and hearing about and studying to be itself. That instant where love is the only thing we experience and safety is the only thing we experience, that is our goal. Because an instant of total peace and a totally quiet, peaceful mind, that contains the memory of God. That contains the memory of what created you. A peaceful, instant, loving, instant that we're not tripping about something. That instant contains the memory of God. And as we look upon a world forgiven, as we look upon a world that we're finally looking at correctly and in peace, it is the Holy Spirit who calls to us and comes to take us home. It is God that calls to us and comes to us to take us home, reminding us of our identity, which our own forgiveness, our own correct perception has restored to us. Your correct perception restores your true identity as an unbelievably loving being to you. So ask yourself, what is the world? What is the real world? Not the world of fear, not the world of separation, not the world that we are afraid of things in. Not the world that it looks like we could be hurt and sometimes have some joyful, pleasurable experiences that seem like they might not last. So even the pleasurable experiences become a source of fear because we become afraid we might lose that pleasurable experience. That's not the real world. The real world is a world that you're looking at not through your ego, not through your fear, not through your sense of separation. So the thought is, what is the real world?